Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing this morning?
Great.
That sounded enthusiastic.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Do we
Hello?
want to try that one more time?
I think we should. How's everybody doing this morning?
Wonderful.
Doing good.
Woo! Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Much better.
So I am Melissa Countryman. I work at the Trinity River Science Learning Center as an instructional assistant. My specialty is in the life sciences, mainly A&P. And this is my cohort, Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Whalen. I teach English at the Northeast campus. I also am coming from a learning lab background where I used to run a writing center. So I'm sort of in the same, I used to be sort of in the same ballpark. But anyway, so today we're here to talk a little bit about the Active Learning Academy and its soon-to-be successor, the Engaged Learning Institute, and sort of how these ideas can be implemented and coordinated with Learning Commons, and specifically with you all. If I recall correctly, Melissa, this group is also science learning.
Mainly, yeah. I know we had a couple of add-ins later, but mostly it should be Science Learning Center faculty and staff.
Great. Fantastic. So sort of diving into this, things are changing a little bit as we transfer or as we shift into the Engaged Learning Institute, as you heard from Paige and Allegra earlier today. But the Active Learning Academy, our vision with the Active Learning Academy is to increase student success and completion through the intentional development of interactive and integrated teaching that transforms learning inside and outside of the classroom. And I really want to emphasize that this isn't just about inside the classroom. It's not just about faculty and how faculty can use engaged and active learning. It's also about how we can coordinate that with the Learning Commons, and also how it can be implemented in, for example, your science learning centers. So even though, for example, our purpose here to empower faculty to enhance student success through the development of a professional learning community and an active learning framework, even though that's very faculty focused, active learning and engaged learning is something that could be implemented throughout all of these instructional specializations. Anytime that you are working with students, engaging with students, this is something that can be used to help students deepen their understanding and their learning. All right.
So obviously we have our vision and purpose there. So we have 6 basic strategies that we like to go over: scaffolding, classroom talk, writing to learn, collaborative group work, questioning, and literacy groups. So either talking or using the chat box. We would like everybody to tell us which ones they use the most. If you do all of them, put all, but the ones that you do the most, that you, most often. Sorry, I keep forgetting words today.
No worries. And just to go through these really briefly, scaffolding is just sort of laying out, setting the groundwork for what students already know and building off of that. Like you would construct scaffolding for a building and then build the building. Scaffolding is very much the same idea with their learning. So relying on that prior knowledge. Classroom talk, using different strategies for making classroom discussions fruitful, something that students will actually learn from, not just participate in. Writing to learn, different writing activities that help students to engage with the ideas, and not theoretically, they usually do learn through the process of writing. Collaborative group work, which I'm sure you all use a great deal in your positions, where students are collaborating together to create a product eventually out of their learning. Questioning, using different types of questions very strategically to elicit responses that help students to learn. And then literacy groups, which kind of dovetails with collaborative group work. Literacy groups have students placed in groups to try to understand a text together so that they can learn how to read a text and also how to understand the text that they have in front of them. So it looks like we've got some responses coming in.
A lot of them are the scaffolding and questioning, which is kind of what we got from our first group. Miss Angela, yes, collaborative group work was also in the top for the last group. And that's because as scientists and within the labs themselves, we already have them set up in teams and lab partners so that they can start discussing some of those big topics. So that's about what we imagined we would see. Which of these is kind of new, but you think you would, yes, staff. Staff definitely use the collaborative groups as well. Especially, I know all of the SLCs are set up slightly different, but a lot of us have group study rooms where the students go in there together to study, or somebody will be studying, say, the muscle model, and another student will come up and say, hey, can I join in? Which is fabulous, because then they can actually start talking about what they're learning. And the more you talk about it with somebody else, the more you retain. Thank you for reminding me to include the staff in that. Are there any on here that you are interested in maybe using more now that it's been brought to your attention? And you don't have to write these down. You can talk, or you can write it down too.
Feel free to use your mics.
Yes.
And also the raise your hand feature if we get a lot of people using their mics.
Yes. Yes, Miss Olga.
Could you repeat? I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question? This just last question.
Yeah. So we've already kind of discussed the ones that we use in a pretty regular basis, right? Which is usually scaffolding, collaborative group work, and questioning. My question is, of these 6, obviously we have those 3 that we use a lot. Of these 6, which one do you think you would like to integrate into your learning centers now that you've seen them?
Yeah, and I believe we do have an English Learning Center moderator here. Do we?
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
what I would like to see is if we can collaborate on the writing to learn. It seems people think the writing lab, it's pretty much for papers, English, history, but in science, we do a lot of writing, and it seems the students don't take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. You know how you write reports, the objectives, your conclusions. And that will be nice if we can collaborate between that there is a lot of writing to be done and learn, students to learn how to write reports, technical science reports, technical reports.
Yes, exactly. And lab reports are definitely a great example of how writing to learn can be implemented in a science learning center or in a science class. That is exactly because one of the things that writing to learn helps with is helping to sort of lay out the ideas that are in your head, to put them into a visual form so that you can then understand and discuss those ideas. So yes, I think you're exactly right. That definitely has a place, a very prominent place in teaching students about science, and how to conduct science.
And collaborating with the Writing Center. Most of your writing centers, they have written research papers, maybe not scientific research papers, but they've still written research papers, which have to be in the same format. So they know how to help guide the students in that direction. And sending them from the SLC, sending them to the Writing Center should never be looked upon as I can't think of a good word for that. That's not going to come out wrong.
It should never be looked down upon.
Right. We should be collaborating with centers who are more geared towards writing versus the actual science. What is a hinge joint, right? And I think that's a very good point. Thank you, Miss Olga, for bringing that up. Writing to Learn isn't necessarily just about the reports themselves, though. Writing to Learn is sometimes taking a hard concept and rewriting it into a paragraph in terms that the student themselves can understand, and then growing from that idea. So sometimes if we're going over a really hard concept like neurons, right? I'll have them write down in a paragraph in their own words what they think is going on. And then I'll come back a little later and we'll go over it and we'll highlight the parts that are really right. And then we will, off to the side, write in more details about what they may be missing. And if something is super wrong, I never use red ink because that always kind of deflates the students. But we do circle it and we talk about not just that it's wrong, but why it's wrong. And I think that in Writing to Learn, you have to write things down sometimes, because that turns it into mechanical memory on top of everything else and helps them retain it. Writing down their own questions helps too.
Yes,
sorry, Tony.
Absolutely. And it's the repetitive stuff. And also once you write, you pretty much come and says, I don't know how to say this. And then that takes you to perhaps open your textbook or go to your ebook, read a little bit, and then come back and finish your paragraph. Exactly right.
Perfect.
But people just don't seem to know that Writing to Learn, it's also part, it's really good for science. And that will be really nice if at one point, once maybe we get face-to-face, the writing part and the science labs come together and see how they can help.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, thank you.
The other one I see a lot of is literacy groups. I know most of our SLCs actually already employ what we call peer tutors. So those are students who just recently went through the classes who are back. And those are good places to start with literacy groups. Also, we have SIs. We have another hand up and I missed it. Oh, Olga, did you have another question, sweetie? Oops. Sorry, just turned it off. Did I just lose everybody? Oh.
I think we were on slide 4. And I think we had a couple of other questions. As we're sorting this out, we do have some interesting comments in the chat from Bethany. Speaking from personal experience, lab reports are one of those things that are not always required at the community college level. Then in the junior/senior level science classes at university require full paper style lab reports. As a student, it would have been helpful to have gotten an introduction to this is a lab report to be better prepared for university science labs. Yes, excellent. So using using lab reports not just as an opportunity for writing to learn, but learning how to do a specific style of writing, because science-based writing is very different from, for example, the writing that I teach in a composition class. I know scientists do a lot of writing that I would definitely ding my students for, but it's appropriate for what you're doing. And so teaching them that that is how one communicates in the scientific community, very important. Good. And then another comment, yes, agree, writing and drawing diagrams can help to learn better. Yes, and drawing is definitely a part of writing to learn. That's one of the things that we're focusing on in the Engaged Learning Institute a little bit further. Also, when students know that they have to present their written work, they prepare for what comes in higher level science courses. Yes, and advising students to write out the steps of the physiological process in their own words. All right, cool.
I know
so,
I went to TCC Northwest when I first started back in school, and I had to do a couple of lab reports, and I felt completely overwhelmed as a student because I had been out of school for 20 years, and I had to get some major help, and it was kind of humbling because I always thought I was a good writer, but I had no idea how to write a report. So these are all really good thoughts.
mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Okay.
I think we had one more question for that.
Yeah, I think I went too far. Sorry. Okay. This thing is not wanting to cooperate with me today. Oh.
Sorry, we are experiencing some technical issues. Give us a moment.
Here we go. Here's some good questions. So we've just covered 1 and 2. What could be done to coordinate engaged learning inside and outside of the classroom? So we've already talked about coordinating with the writing group. We already have the SLC. One of the things some of our science teachers do at Trinity River is they'll give them an assignment that makes them actually go around the different spaces, but mainly to the SLC, and do little things within the SLC so they know where things are at. Like, how do I find this specific model, and how do I log into the SLC, the Trinity River SLC group page so that I can find resources, and how do I work in this actual, so like we're using visible body and we're using APR inside of the McGraw-Hill. So they have to do a few steps in there, and we help walk them through those as tutors so that they get to know us as well and start getting comfortable coming into the SLC. So that's one thing we use. Is there anything you guys use to help that your faculty use to help get the students interested in the SLC, or at least introduced?
Okay, we've got one suggestion. Some professors bring classes over during the first week of the semester. Yeah, this is, more specific to my own discipline, but when I have my students working on their first paper, around the time that I give them the prompt for it, I actually take them and physically drag them over to the writing center, to the writing lab, to, make them actually see, hey, look how close our classroom is to this. And yeah, something more consistent would be good. Yeah. Reminders on that are definitely a thing. But there's also more coordination that can be done, I think, between Learning Commons, between the science learning centers and perhaps their classes. One example I think I had mentioned in our last breakout session was literacy groups, to establish literacy groups where, for example, students might have a text that they're working with a group to go through, pick out different terms that they need to learn to understand, pick out different parts of what goes into that scientific text, and understand what their purpose is and what they're saying in that particular text. And that this could perhaps be done within the context of the Science Learning Center to then support perhaps an activity in class or in their lab, just as an idea. And
yes,
scavenger.
Scavenger hunts. I really like that idea. I think it's something we can start integrating with more of the classes. Right now, mostly it's our life sciences that use that. Right now, with everything being virtual, we also have some of the professors scheduling tours for them to come into the SLC virtual tutoring website and get some tours on where all the resources are virtually, and to help them with some of their software that they've been using. Anyone else?
And Angela points out most of the scavenger hunts seem to be the first time in college students who are doing that for, I think, orientation.
Right.
Yeah, it's also a good reminder, not just for them, but because often first time in college students, they're very overwhelmed with learning all of these. It's something you can encourage, that I personally would encourage faculty to do, as a reminder to students who it maybe has been a minute since they went on that student orientation tour. And I personally send my students running off on selfie scavenger hunts. They have to go take pictures of themselves in front of various things that they will use for my class, including the library and the writing center.
Idea, Tony.
All right.
I think so too, Angela. Sorry, Tony.
No. Okay.
Moving to the next one. So part of what we wanted to do was kind of discuss the different, they suggested 4 different activities. So the Poll Everywhere word cloud. Does anybody not know what a Poll Everywhere word cloud is? Okay. So if you remember from the general one, right? She had one slide where it had one word in the middle, and I think it was interactive. But then there were a bunch of smaller words all around that word. And what Poll Everywhere does is you can send your students a link to this Poll Everywhere. You can join it by texting. And they all text a word that reminds them, in this case, right, of what engaged learning should mean without using those 2 words specifically. So cheerleader, interactive, application of ideas, all of that stuff. They can text it to that specific number, and then it'll make its own word cloud. And what happens is, if a word is used over and over again by people, it's going to get slowly bigger and bigger. So if the main word that everybody is thinking as far as engaged learning is interactive, that's going to be the biggest word on the page, while the rest of them are going to be in there, and they all make up this one giant picture, which is kind of what we're talking about when we talk about scaffolding. It's what makes up the base of the rest of the idea. And then we go into smaller and smaller details. Poll Everywhere, I believe, is free for most of what you would use it for, but there are other ways to use Poll Everywhere. You can actually do a poll like you would think of, right? If these are your options, who would you vote for? Except geared towards science. If I were to talk about sight, which cranial nerve would I be talking about? And you can list the cranial nerves and kind of see how many of the students are on the right track, because if all of the students are on the right track, maybe you don't need to spend as much time on that. If none of the students are on the right track, then maybe it's something you need to go a little bit deeper into. And that takes us down to reflection.
Yes. So we were being kind of cheeky with this, trying to show you guys the different activities that were suggested for this portion of the presentation. But one of the things that the Active Learning Academy does, we like to try to demonstrate some of the activities. We explain some of them, but we also like to demonstrate some of them. And so here for reflection, reflection is a writing to learn activity, and I find this very helpful. Even when I was working in a learning lab, I found it very helpful to have students sit down and write out, okay, reflect on this. What did you learn? How are you going to apply this? And Melissa, can we go back to the last slide?
I didn't even touch anything. Hold on, sorry.
No worries, no worries.
There
There we go.
My bad.
All right. So here, what I have for you is a Google Docs link. You guys are, and my phone just responded to the word Google. What I have here is a link to a Google Doc. And if you would, there's a link next to Indigo. You guys should be Breakout Room Indigo. I hope that I have the right one this time. So if you click on that, it should take you to a Google Doc that all of us can see. And I've asked the question, what did you learn about engaged learning that you didn't know before today? And just on a line in that Google Doc, if you'd put down a couple of thoughts there, we can, we'll keep going with this a little bit, and then we can come back and see what is it that you've learned and maybe discuss that a bit more. And can everybody find the link? Oh, yep, I see a whole bunch of people in that Google Doc.
Woo woo.
Okay. And I like the addition here. The intentional strategy can be quick, as we do not always have a lot of time. Yeah, some of these active learning strategies, they come with it, we have some different activities that are developed for them, and some of them will take time and planning to set up, but others are very quick, both to set up and to do. And there's something that could be really helpful to have ready in your bag that you can pull out to have students engage more with the ideas. The more they engage, obviously, the better they're going to retain the information, the better they're going to understand it. So excellent. And we've got some other input here. There are a lot more applications than what appear at face value. Very true. And I'll tell you guys the same thing that I have told to our ALA students. If there's something that you want to, if there is an activity you want to try out, or there's a lesson or something that you're working on that you are trying to figure out an activity to do with, you can always come talk to me. I love bouncing ideas back and forth on things like that. All All right, I see. Oh, still writing out a lot of these comments. Writing to learn can be incorporated more in my tutoring on biology subjects, as the mechanical learning can be beneficial to the student. Yes. I think I'd given the example, one of the, and this kind of ties in both writing to learn and also questioning. Asking a student, if a student is struggling, for example, in biology, you might have them sit down and write out, okay, what are the similarities between the process of mitosis and meiosis? And then flip that around. What are the differences? And having the student articulate that in their own words would help them, and write it down, would help them to understand that a bit better. Okay, fantastic. And we've got one comment here from Angela that we are already doing it, but could maybe be more intentional about it. And that's one thing that we have always emphasized to faculty, and I think is just as applicable in learning labs. You're already doing a lot of this. We're just giving you some vocabulary for what it is that you're doing already, and giving you maybe some additional ideas and some space to think about how to do it intentionally. So, fantastic.
Great job, guys. So we're moving on to the 5 types of questions. Most of us as scientists know what these 5 types are. What I usually do with my students, I usually go around, I know some of us just wait for hands to be held up and then we go answer questions specifically, but I always kind of like to walk around the room and see what people are working on and ask them if they want anybody to talk something over with. Even if they're not having problems, sometimes having somebody to talk it over with helps. But then you'll find those groups of students who are working on, say, a Jeopardy question, and they're like, well, why is it this? I thought it would be this or this. And that's something I actually like to do when they do finally ask a question. Okay, so let's discuss why it isn't A. Not just tell them what the right answer is and why, but go over all the other answers and explain or try to get them to think about why it's false. So if the question was about muscle contraction and it said, which of these is responsible for umpty squat? Well, why isn't it A? Why isn't it B? Why isn't it D? Why isn't it E? And then go back to the right answer and be like, okay, now we know that why all of these are wrong. Why is this one right? Because it takes it out of your ball court, even though you do have to know what you're talking about, right? And it makes them start having to put puzzle pieces together instead of just memorizing the correct answers. Does anybody have anything they want to add to that, or maybe something else that they use within the SLC that helps them with their students? That I know. Okay. Then I'm going to hand it back to Tony.
All right. And we've discussed this we've already mentioned this a couple of times, but literacy groups as one possible idea. And here, one suggested activity would be to have students identify, well, in this context, have participants identify 4 terms or concepts that students need to know in order to function in your arena. So identifying those 4 terms and then understanding them. This is something you could also do with students. You're trying to understand a process, or you're trying to understand a concept. What are 4 terms that you need to have the students work as a group to think of? What are these 4 terms that you need in order to understand this concept, and then define these terms? What do they mean? What do they imply? How do they tie into each other and to other things? So this is something I've seen done with history classes. I have also done in my own classes, but I think it lends itself really nicely to working with the sciences as well.
Also with literacy groups, we kind of already talked about this. We do have those peer tutors. We do have the peer mentors. When people come into the center and say, like, for AMP1 kids who are at the very beginning and they're struggling with that chemistry section, right? Sometimes I'll have them sit at my desk and I'll have 2 or 3 of them at a time. And we'll be asking and going over the concepts together, but that also introduces them to each other, even if they're in different sections, so that they start collaborating together. And maybe they found a new study buddy, somebody who can actually come in and they're already there at the same time as the other student. So chances are they have the same type of study schedule. And they form their own literacy group. So just getting people together when you're going over one specific topic, if you know there's more than one student in the room, can sometimes help them form their own study groups without pushing them, because I know some of us are introverts and we do not do well when studying with others. But it gives you a chance to kind of go over the topic with them, and if they want to form those connections at that point, they can. So far, so good. Any questions? Is there anything you feel that we didn't go over that you were more interested in than we kind of went into it?
Alternatively, are there perhaps some activities that you want to try that maybe you're not sure how to incorporate it, or that you'd like to see tried out?
I think they're all ready for lunch. All right. We can go ahead and finish early then. General session will kick back off at noon for a wrap up. I'm going to go ahead and stay in the classroom for a little bit. So if you do have any questions, just go ahead and type them in there. And we'll
be hanging out in here.
If one of us can answer them. If you don't have any questions, go ahead, take a long break, and we will see you at noon in the general assembly room.
Thank you guys for the nice presentation. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yes, it's been great chatting with you all, getting your perspectives on this.
Thank you.